In this very long video, I'm going to share everything I learned about self-publishing my first book. I will leave timestamps for all of the topics in the description box down below. When I was done with the first draft of my book, that was really when I started considering the question, what do I want to do with this? And I landed on self-publishing pretty quickly. I'm a hobbyist when it comes to writing, and this book is truly a passion project for me. I could have, of course, kept this book for myself, and all along the way as I was writing it, I told myself that if I don't want to publish it, I don't have to. But in the end, I was really curious about the process of self-publishing, and I wanted to put my work out into the world very similar to how I publish YouTube videos. Since I'm putting this book out into the world, I want it to be high quality, and I also want it to be a reflection of myself. Of course, I want it to do well, but I'm also fine if it doesn't sell that many copies, because I am looking at writing more as a hobby than a business. So that's one question I would suggest asking yourself at the beginning of your self-publishing journey. Is this more of a hobby for you, or do you want it to be a business? Of course, you can change your mind down the road, but if you're clear on this from the beginning, it will actually guide a lot of your decisions as you're making choices about self-publishing, and there are a lot of decisions and choices that need to be made. When I had my first draft ready, that was when I started to think about whether I wanted to query my book, whether I wanted to try to find an agent or a publisher and go the traditionally published route. My book is in the personal growth or self-help space, and it's basically all about tuning into your inner compass in 12 areas of life. I had very specific things that I wanted for this book. I wanted the book to be a little bigger, cookbook size, because I view each exercise as a recipe. I also wanted the book to be color. The book I was envisioning was also very repetitive, and I had also decided that this was going to be a passion project. Having all of that in the back of my mind, and if I was being honest with myself, I knew that I wasn't interested in looking for an agent or a publisher. I thought that might cause a lot of delays, as I'd have to wait for their response. I would for sure get a lot of rejections, and then I would need to try again, etc. So I really didn't have that desire to go through all of that. I was also worried that the delay would stall my momentum in terms of the excitement I had for the book and my desire to work on it. And being a passion project, I really didn't want to shelve the idea or wait for external validation. So I decided to go ahead with self-publishing as a hobbyist. Once I made that decision, it was time to move to the next step. And for me, the next step was finding beta readers. I had my first draft, and I was really curious to know whether my book would resonate with an audience, not necessarily an agent or a publisher. Instead, I wanted to get some feedback from everyday readers, so I went ahead and looked for some beta readers. I mainly reached out to family, friends, and acquaintances. I knew that this passion project, when it was published, it would be most likely consumed, purchased, or read by friends and family. So I really wanted their impression of it and their feedback on it early on. But I also know that there's value in getting feedback from strangers. But when I looked into these beta reader swaps and exchanges and such, I found that a lot of them were based in fiction, and I don't have a work of fiction. My book is a little bit different in terms of the way it's laid out. Because it is mostly self-reflection exercises, I really wanted a beta reader who would also test out some of the exercises. I felt like that might be too much to ask of a beta read exchange. I didn't think I would find someone who was also writing a self-help book and also self-reflection exercises so that we could exchange beta reads of our books. What I decided to do in terms of getting my book beta read by strangers was I hired a few people from Fiverr. I specifically looked for beta readers who were interested in beta reading self-help books, because I know that self-help books aren't everyone's cup of tea. I reached out to them with a custom gig and explained that I also wanted some of the exercises tested. I hired 5 beta readers to do this, and I loved that they were from different parts of the world. So I had a beta reader in the US, in the UK, India, Pakistan, and Malaysia. Because I was paying them, there weren't any issues with non-delivery of services. I've read that that's an issue when getting free beta readers, because they don't always read your book or provide feedback. So I really wanted to continue moving forward with my book. And because I allocate 1 month for each chapter, the beta reading process can get dragged out. So I really tried to keep it within a 2 to 3 month time frame. Once I incorporated the beta reader feedback, I dove deep into editing. I started with a self-edit of my book, including going through all of the exercises and testing them out myself once again. I had done this 2 times by this point. I also read the personal stories of my book out loud, and I edited in that way, using audio as a way to reflect on what I was writing and to see if it actually flowed and made sense. I also purchased a subscription to Pro Writing Aid so I could use their tools. I didn't find the inline suggestions all that helpful, so I only accepted a portion of these. But where I did find the tool very helpful was in some of the aggregated reporting that they provide. So I really liked the report on sentence length and the readability of the document in terms of grade level. I wanted something that was very, very easy to read and understand. I also really liked the report that talked about sensory words. This provides a summary of how often you use words that are related to the 5 senses. The other benefit to this tool is that it catches inconsistencies in terms of spelling. So I spell in Canadian English, but there's also, of course, British English and American English. And I caught a few words that were spelled differently in different areas of the document using this tool. The tool is also useful in finding your crutch words. So these are words that you use over and over again without really realizing it. I picked up on a few of those and tried to change them where I could. All of this self-editing was in preparation for my book to go out to a professional editor. There are a lot of different types of editors out there in terms of what they focus on in the document. The 3 main ones that I'm aware of are developmental edits, copy edits, and line edits. You can find out what all of these different types of edits are via Google search, but my editor provided a service that was in the bucket of copy editing. Because my book is long and repetitive, I decided that I would hire a copy editor to focus on the introduction, the personal stories that start each chapter, and also the conclusion. So this is about 23,000 words out of the 77,000 words in my book. I decided not to send the exercises for copy editing, trusting that I had self-edited enough and that I would take the feedback from my copy editor and also apply those principles to the exercises themselves. Once I got the feedback in from my copy editor, I went through the book again, and then it was time to think about whether or not I wanted to have ARCs, or advanced reader copies. The main goal of sending out ARCs is to get reader reviews in advance of launch day. So I decided not to do ARCs because of the nature of my book. Because my book is mainly self-reflection exercises, I feel like you do need to sit with it for a long time to get any value from it, and I suggest 1 month per chapter. That's a lot to plan for in terms of timing, and it's also a lot to ask in terms of a reader. My book isn't really designed to be read from cover to cover. The other thing is that I would have wanted to send out the PDF version of my book because I think that's the best representation of it versus the Mobi or EPUB versions. But the PDF version, because I laid it out completely differently from the print version, that wasn't finished until a couple of days or even the day before launch. So I decided for all of those reasons that my book wasn't a good fit for ARCs, but I do see value in the process. So if my book was a more traditional book that could be read from cover to cover, I would definitely budget some time for ARCs. And there are a lot of different methods that you can use to get your book into the hand of advanced readers. Because I had a vision for this book very early on, I had been working on the cover and layout throughout, just testing things out, sending things to print, getting prototypes back and such. But I really dove into designing the cover and the layout after I had my final manuscript. I tried a couple of different platforms in terms of layout, and none of them suited what I wanted for the book, so I decided to go ahead and try InDesign. I went ahead and learned the program, which was a lot of fun. I really do love learning how to make things and to put things together. So for me, learning InDesign was a very fun part of the process, but it definitely could be challenging or tedious if you're not used to that type of work, and if your bread and butter, your main passion, really is writing. I consider myself to be more of a creative explorer, so I really loved all the aspects of putting this book together, but if you're very, very focused on writing, then you might want to hire someone for the cover and the layout. I had in the back of my mind that if I couldn't get the cover and layout to look how I wanted, I would be open to hiring someone. But fortunately, everything turned out as I expected. I love my cover and my layout, and I'm really happy I went the route of doing it all myself. Again, this is a passion project, so I was careful about where I spent my money. I wanted to be really selective about that. Once I had my book all laid out, I sent a proof out to print. I used a company called Blur blurb, which I'll talk about more when I talk about distribution. The proof arrived, it was what I had hoped for, and so I started proofreading. This was a very, very tedious process. I went through my book at least 3 or 4 times proofreading. I proofread the print copy, the PDF copy, the documents that eventually became my EPUB and Mobi versions. I also recorded myself reading the personal stories out loud and listened to them back in order to proofread. And I also listened to my entire book multiple times using a screen reader. I did that at least 2 or 3 times. So I think I did maybe 8 passes of proofreading. I decided not to hire a proofreader because my book is long and repetitive, and it would have costed a lot of money for me to have someone proofread from beginning to end. I also trust in my ability to proofread because I've done this type of work in the past, not as a professional proofreader, but proofreading different documents and such at various jobs that I've had throughout my life. I was also aware that the person who cares the most about my book is me, and this is my passion project, so I was willing to put in the time and the effort to proofread my own work. Even if you hire a proofreader though, I would recommend going through the book yourself and proofreading it as many times as you can, because even with all of this proofreading, even though I went over the book 8 times, I know there are still going to be things that I missed, and even if I had hired a proofreader, the proofreader doesn't catch everything either. So for me, the best decision was to proofread my own work, but depending on how comfortable you are with that, you may want to hire someone. By the end of all of these iterations of proofreading, I was thoroughly sick of my book, and that's when I knew it was ready. Let's talk about ISBNs. These are International Standard Book Numbers, and you do require an ISBN for all print copies of your book, but it's a little more gray when it comes to ebook versions. For print books, the self-publishing platform that you use will most likely have free ISBNs that they will assign to your books, or you can override those by obtaining your own ISBNs. That's what I chose to do because I live in Canada and it's free to set up an ISBN account, and it's also free to obtain pretty much as many ISBNs as you want. There are definitely pros to having your own ISBN in terms of moving your book around in between platforms and such. I didn't think I would do that, but again, since it's free in Canada, I decided just to go for it and have my own ISBNs set up. I did assign a different ISBN to each of my print versions, so softcover and hardcover, and as well my 3 ebook versions, PDF, Kindle, and EPUB. The next categories that I'm going to talk about are very dependent on your goals for the book. In other words, whether you are more of a hobbyist or whether you are viewing this as a business. So one thing that comes into play is pricing. What are you going to price your book at? Part of me was thinking, since I'm not trying to make money from this book, why set a price at all? Why not just give it out for free? But I have a long history of undervaluing my work, and setting a reasonable price for my book was particularly important to me. I realized a lot about myself when I was doing the self-reflection exercises in my book, and this really stood out as something that I was consciously doing to value myself and to value the work, the time, and the effort that I put into my passion project. There are a lot of pricing strategies out there. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but pricing your book can have a meaningful impact on sales, so you'll want to do a bit of research before setting a price. I, of course, did some research as well. I do believe my price is reasonable for similar books that are in my genre, which is self-help and personal growth. I have a lot to say about distribution. The first thing being that I knew pretty early on that I wanted to go wide. I considered enrolling in KDP Select, but a part of me knew that I wanted to sell the PDF on my website, and KDP Select is an exclusive program, so if you enroll your book in that, you can't sell your ebook anywhere else, although you can sell your print book elsewhere. A PDF is, of course, an ebook version, so I decided not to enroll in KDP Select. I knew very early on that I wanted a print book. That was the overarching goal of me writing this book. I envisioned a book that was similar in size and layout to a cookbook, but I knew I wouldn't have as many images. With that in mind, I started looking into companies where I could make a print-on-demand book. I had used one in the past for their photo books, and that is a company called Blurb. Lulu is another option, although I've never directly made a book on there myself. In addition to these standalone print-on-demand companies, there's also Ingram Spark and Amazon. Based on my research, it looked like Blurb had the best and most consistent print quality, so I decided to go ahead and try one of Blurb's trade books because previously I had only printed photo books. I did also do some initial research in terms of wider distribution with Blurb, and this is where I should have looked into the details a bit more carefully before making my decision, because this did give me some hiccups down the road. Overall, I am happy I went with them. There are just a few things where I'm like, oh, I wish that were different, or maybe I should have looked into that further. Blurb does have an option to submit your book to the global distribution network through Ingram Spark. Ingram Spark is the entity that distributes books to retailers. So you could upload directly with Ingram Spark and order your proofs and your author copies and such through them, but I decided not to do that because I read that the quality wasn't that great. Their interface is a little bit tricky, and you also have to pay for the initial upload, and I believe you have to pay for changes as well. There's also the option to upload to Amazon directly using their KDP print program. That's the option I wish I had looked into more closely. Ingram Spark's catalog is also available to Amazon, so that's one way I could have had my Blurb book available on Amazon, is to submit through this program. But when I read the terms and conditions more closely, I decided not to do that. The first thing that swayed my decision was that Ingram Spark had actually increased their volume discounts. These are mandatory discounts that the author has to provide to be allowed into the global distribution network. The discount that they recommend is 55%, but they also had a lower option, which if you choose, it could affect your distribution, and I believe that was at 32% if I'm not mistaken. But as I was getting ready to submit my book, I noticed that they had actually increased that lower tier to 40%. So now the options as I record this video are 40% discount or 55% discount. So what they do is they add this discount to the minimum retail price for your book. And because my book is cookbook style, it's in color, it's repetitive, so there are very many pages, the cost of my book was already pretty high to print through Blurb. And again, because Blurb is higher quality, they also charge more for the print. Grossing the production price of my book up by 55% and then adding a small author profit would have made my book obscenely expensive, so I was going to go with the lower option, the 32%, but when they increased that mandatory volume discount to 40%, I just couldn't justify it, and then I kept reading the terms and conditions, which I should have done before. And Blurb has a clause to protect themselves, and I completely understand this as a person with a business background. Of course, they would need to do this. When you distribute through Amazon, Blurb still does the fulfillment, so they will still print the book and they will ship it to the customer. But because the person has purchased the book through Amazon, Amazon's return policies apply, and if the customer returns the book, Amazon will give them the refund, they will accept the book as a return, and then somewhere along the way the book gets destroyed. Amazon's not going to hold that as inventory, neither is Blurb, so they will destroy the book, but Blurb has already incurred the cost of printing that book. So what could happen if I sell a bunch of books this way and there are a bunch of returns, these books are destroyed? Blurb could then bill me for the printing cost of these books, and that can add up. Even if I don't sell a lot of books, and even if there aren't a bunch of returns, that is a risk that I'm not willing to take. I would feel very uncomfortable with having that looming. So that's why I decided not to submit my book through this network and instead only offer it for sale on Blurb. Blurb does not accept returns, but they will replace a book if there's a manufacturing defect or damage from shipping. So I'm super comfortable with that, and I'm feeling pretty good about my decision. The one thing that I wish I had time to do was to reformat my book for Amazon, print out a test copy, and see how different the quality is. So if the quality was much lower, I may have gone with Blurb anyway, but if the quality was acceptable, I might have gone the route of uploading it directly to Amazon. And you might be wondering, what about returns in that situation? As it stands now, I've read that Amazon will hold inventory for print-on-demand books that are produced through their KDP system, and they will ship out that same book, assuming it's in decent condition, once it's ordered again. So I wouldn't be hit with a bill for the printing cost of the book, but it would affect my royalty in that I wouldn't be able to get the royalty for the second sale. That seems very reasonable to me, so that's something I would look into for my next book. Of course, things can change, so I highly recommend that you do your own due diligence and make sure that you're comfortable with all of the terms and conditions, whichever distribution route you choose. To summarize in terms of distribution, I have the PDF available on my website. I have my print book on Blurb. I have a Kindle version available on Amazon, but not enrolled in KDP Select, so the ebook doesn't have to be exclusive to Amazon. I also used Draft to Digital to submit to the other ebook retailers like Barnes & Noble, Kobo, etc. Let's talk about launch day. I loved my launch day because I really listened to my inner compass when deciding what to do for the day. I decided quite early on that I wasn't going to have an in-person launch event. I'm very introverted and crowds make me very nervous. I don't like being the center of attention, so a launch day really isn't aligned with the type of person I am, even though I have been to launch events and they are very lovely because everyone is there celebrating the author. I would personally be very nervous leading up to the launch, and this was the type of stress that I wasn't willing to take on, in addition to making sure everything went right and everything was done for the actual book launch itself in terms of setting up the logistics. So no launch event for me, but I spent the day with my husband. We went for a lovely brunch. I bought myself a little plant. I just had a really lovely day that was full of rest and relaxation. I sold a few copies of my book. I also received some very sweet congratulatory messages, and I just generally felt very, very good on launch day. The last thing I'm going to talk about before I share some resources is marketing. And you may be thinking, why did I leave marketing for the end? There are a lot of recommendations out there to start promoting your book early. I decided not to try to build hype for my book. I wanted to release it quietly, and the marketing for me will be a very slow and gradual type of marketing. This relates to my book being a hobby and not a business. If you're treating your book as a business, you may want to ramp up your marketing efforts way before your book is launched. You can do cover reveals and reviews that you've received from ARCs and the like. You can post all of that and just generate a lot of buzz for your book. For me, the marketing of my book started on launch day, and I'm going to slowly be talking about my book more because I plan to go through my book as a reader and go through the self-reflection exercises, do my own Authenblissity reset, and I'm going to be posting videos and doing blog posts about that for the upcoming 12 months. These are things I would have done anyway, but I'm categorizing them as marketing because I am sharing about my book and getting the word out there. I've also got some ideas for other projects related to the concept of Authenblissity, and I'm giving myself 10 to 15 years to see these projects through. So this is going to be a softer approach to marketing, a more organic approach to marketing. I won't be doing ads, for example, Google ads or Facebook ads at this time either. A lot of the advice I read for self-published authors is that the best use of your time is to write your second book. I've read that ads are more effective if you have a backlist of around 4 or more books. So I am very, very far from that. So I won't be looking into ads at this time. And again, the goal was never really to sell more books. It would be lovely to sell some books, but it's not the main objective. There is a lot of advice about marketing and using platforms like TikTok or Facebook, Instagram, etc. I did post to pretty much all of the social media platforms. That doesn't mean I'm going to be active on all of them. I am focusing my time on YouTube, but I did want to have at least an announcement on all of the different platforms. That is everything I wanted to talk about in terms of self-publishing. I'm going to leave you with a few resources in terms of where you can find more information. Remember, as you're Googling things, that that a lot of the resources that you find online are trying to sell you something. So always check in with yourself to see if the advice is aligned with your goals and what you want for your book. So a lot of the advice that I encountered was for the business aspect of self-publishing, trying to make it an author business. And I would say that a lot of self-published authors have this goal, but it wasn't aligned with what I wanted for myself and for my book. So just be careful when you're reading advice. Try to filter through and pick the advice that works for you, and you can discard the rest. I was on the self-published subreddit a ton, and there is a lot of information in there. I really liked this forum because I found the people to be really helpful. You can still take the advice or leave it, but because there is no self-promotion on this subreddit, at least you know that people aren't trying to sell you something. The last resource I want to share is the Self-Publishing Advice podcast, which I listened to quite a bit as I was getting ready to launch my book. I found a lot of the episodes very helpful. I did pick and choose which ones to listen to depending on topics that I was interested in. I found the Q&A ones really helpful, as well as the episodes on marketing and promotion. One thing to note though is that the self-publishing world is changing pretty rapidly, so if you listen to some of the older podcasts, you might still want to do some research before implementing things in case things have changed. I think I might be losing my voice. This has been a marathon of a video. If you are on the self-publishing journey, I would love to hear from you in the comments section down below. Please let me know where you're at in your own journey and whether you have any tips to share. It's a huge thing to write a book and put it out in the world, and I really do wish you success if you're on that journey. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I will be back very soon with another one. Until then, please take care and bye for now.